Let me start with something that happened on June 22nd, 2026. Keir Starmer stood outside 10 Downing Street and said one sentence. I want you to hold on to this sentence for the next few minutes. Okay? He said this: I have heard the answer of my parliamentary party to that question, and I accept that answer with good grace. Sounds humble, sounds democratic. Sounds like a prime minister stepping aside because his own MPs lost confidence in him. Full stop. End of story. 3 days later, 3 days, okay? Chancellor Rachel Reeves gave a press statement backing Andy Burnham as the next Labour leader. But she didn't just endorse him. She told him to keep going with her economic plan, in her words, because it is beginning to bear fruit. And almost nobody connected those two moments. A prime minister humbly accepting his party's judgment, and 3 days later, the chancellor handing his successor a list of instructions before a single ballot had even opened. So that's the story most coverage is running with. A government in crisis, a leader who lost the room, and a popular mayor swooping in to save the party. It's a clean story. It has a satisfying logic to it. The tired old guard gets pushed out, the energetic outsider gets pulled in. But today, I'm going to do something most coverage of this isn't doing. I'm going to put 3 competing theories on the table. I'm going to walk through the actual sequence of events from the last 6 weeks, and then I'm going to let you decide which one explains what we're actually watching. 3 theories, same set of events, only one framework that explains all of it. Ready? Let's go. First, the names. Theory 1 I'm calling the accountability story. This is the version most newspapers are running. Starmer lost his party's confidence after a string of bad results, a scandal, and several high-profile resignations. The Parliamentary Labour Party forced him out through normal democratic pressure. Burnham is simply the most popular figure available to replace him, and the party is doing exactly what parties are supposed to do when a leader becomes a liability. Theory 2 I'm calling the managed succession. This theory says the crisis was real, but the outcome was not left to chance. A small group inside the party cleared a specific, narrow path for one specific person well before the public crisis fully played out, and every other plausible rival either stepped aside or was boxed out before voting ever began. Theory 3 is where I want to land today. I'm calling it the controlled handover. This says both of the first 2 theories are true at the same time. The anger inside the party was genuine. The pressure on Starmer was genuine. But the establishment used that genuine anger to deliver a result it had already decided on, while keeping just enough public appearance of an open contest to call it democracy. Let's start with Theory 1, and let me give you the strongest version of it, because I don't want to strawman anybody. Here's the case. Labour had a brutal May. Local election results were poor across England. In Wales, the Senedd election ended 100 years of Labour control, dropping the party to 3rd place behind Plaid Cymru and Reform UK Wales. Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar publicly called for Starmer to resign months earlier, in February, during a vetting scandal involving a senior appointment, saying his primary loyalty was to Scotland and that Starmer's leadership was undermining it. Health Secretary Wes Streeting resigned from cabinet on May 14th. Defense Secretary John Healey and Armed Forces Minister Al Carnes both resigned on June 11th over a dispute about defense spending. By mid-June, roughly 103 Labour MPs had publicly called for Starmer to resign or set a timetable for leaving, against 158 still backing him. Leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, called his position untenable. Green Party leader Zach Polanski said Starmer lost the country's confidence over what he called an abject failure to challenge entrenched power and wealth. That is a real, documented pileup of bad news, resignations, and internal dissent. Any leader in any party facing that combination would be in serious trouble. The theory that Starmer simply ran out of road is not a conspiracy. It's the plain reading of the public record. But here's the question that theory doesn't answer, and it's the one I want you to actually sit with. If this was simply an organic, bottom-up collapse of confidence, why did the single most consequential move in the entire sequence happen weeks before the public crisis peaked? And why did it require something that hasn't happened in Britain in 60 years? Here's what I mean. Andy Burnham wasn't even a sitting member of Parliament when this began. He'd been mayor of Greater Manchester since 2017, outside the Commons entirely. To become Labour leader, under the party's own rules, he needed to be an MP. So on May 14th, the same day Wes Streeting resigned from cabinet, Makerfield MP Josh Simons resigned his own seat specifically to create a vacancy for Burnham to contest. Not because Simons did anything wrong, not because of any scandal. He resigned purely to open a door for one man. The resulting by-election, held on June 18th, was the first time since the 1965 Leighton by-election that a UK by-election was caused specifically to create a seat for someone who wasn't already in Parliament. Sit with that for a second. The mechanism that allowed Burnham to even be eligible for the leadership was not a normal feature of the system working itself out. It was a one-off, custom-built bypass, deployed weeks before Starmer's resignation was public, on the same day his own health secretary walked out of cabinet. That single fact is the crack in Theory 1, and it's where Theory 2 starts to look a lot stronger. Let me walk you through 5 specific data points, all from the public record, all dated, none of them disputed. First, Burnham won the Makerfield by-election on June 18th with almost 25,000 votes and a majority over 9,200, comfortably outperforming pre-election polling that had projected a much narrower race against Reform UK. Reform underperformed badly compared to its showing in the May local elections. That result gave Burnham exactly what he needed, a seat in the Commons, with momentum, 4 days before Starmer resigned. Second, Burnham's most credible potential rival for the leadership was Wes Streeting. On June 22nd, the same day Burnham returned to the Commons to take his seat, Streeting publicly announced he would not run and endorsed Burnham instead, saying he was convinced there was a place for his own ideas under Burnham's leadership. The most obvious alternative candidate removed himself from the race on the exact day his replacement walked into Parliament. Third, Darren Jones, a senior cabinet minister and Starmer ally who had also been mentioned as a possible candidate, announced he would not challenge Burnham either. 2 of the most plausible rivals gone within days of each other before nominations had even opened. Fourth, on June 25th, Chancellor Rachel Reeves publicly backed Burnham, but attached a specific condition to that backing. She urged him to continue with her economic plan, telling him it was beginning to bear fruit. That's not a neutral endorsement. That's the Treasury setting the policy terms for the next leader before party members have cast a single vote. Fifth, under Labour's own rules, any leadership candidate needs the support of at least 81 MPs, a fifth of the parliamentary party, just to get on the ballot. With Streeting and Jones out, and momentum already consolidated around Burnham, the practical effect of that threshold is to make a genuine multi-candidate contest extremely difficult to assemble in time. Nominations open July 9th and close a week later. If Burnham ends up the only candidate to clear that bar, he could be prime minister by July 17th, without a single vote being cast by party members and without any general election at all. Put those 5 things together, and the picture shifts. It's not simply that Burnham was the most popular option once the contest opened. The contest was substantially decided before it opened, through a custom by-election, a rival's early withdrawal, a second rival's withdrawal, a chancellor's public conditions, and a nomination threshold that rewards whoever already has the institutional momentum. Now here's the part that makes this more than just a story about clever party management. Critics, including commentators cited by HuffPost UK, have pointed out a sharp piece of hypocrisy in how this is being handled. Back in 2022, when the Conservative Party changed prime ministers twice in quick succession, from Boris Johnson to Liz Truss to Rishi Sunak, all without a general election, Starmer was one of the loudest voices arguing that swapping prime ministers without a public vote lacked any democratic mandate. He explicitly demanded a general election each time it happened. Now that his own party is doing the same thing, using the same legal mechanism, an internal party process rather than a national vote, those critics argue Labour is applying a completely different standard to itself. That's the contradiction Theory 3 is built to explain. Both things are true at once. Starmer's fall was real and was driven by genuine internal anger over results, scandal, and policy disputes. And at the same time, the specific outcome, Burnham as the uncontested or near uncontested successor, was something the party's senior figures had already cleared the runway for, weeks in advance, using mechanisms most voters never see and most coverage never explains. The genuine crisis gave the party cover. Nobody can accuse Labor of stitching up a succession when the leader they're replacing is visibly underwater in the polls, has lost 100 years of control in Wales, and has watched cabinet ministers resign one after another. The public anger was the permission structure. The by-election, the early withdrawals, and the chancellor's conditions were the actual mechanism. One gave the other legitimacy. So here's what I'd watch over the next few weeks. Because this is how you test a theory like this. You make predictions and see if the evidence matches. First, watch nominations when they open on July 9th. If no credible rival to Burnham assembles the 81 MPs needed to get on the ballot by July 16th, that's the clearest possible confirmation that the contest was effectively decided before it formally started. Second, watch whether Reeves stays as chancellor under Burnham, and watch her language closely. If the economic plan she described as bearing fruit continues unchanged under new leadership, that tells you the policy continuity was the actual price of her support, not just supportive rhetoric. Third, watch what happens with Al Carnes. He resigned as Armed Forces Minister in protest over defense spending and has said publicly he isn't ready to decide whether he'll run for the leadership himself. If he or anyone else genuinely tries to mount a contest and struggles to find 81 MPs willing to back a challenge, watch how quickly that effort is described in the press as splitting the party at a difficult time, rather than as a normal democratic option. Here's your homework. Go find the original Wikipedia and parliamentary timeline of the 2026 labor leadership crisis. Lay the dates side by side. May 14th, Streeting resigns and Simons resigns to open the seat. June 11th, Healy and Carnes resign over defense spending. June 18th, Burnham wins the by-election. June 22nd, Burnham takes his seat and Streeting endorses him the same day, and Starmer announces his resignation. June 25th, Reeves backs Burnham with conditions attached. Look at how close together those dates sit, and ask yourself whether that sequence reads like an institution reacting to chaos or an institution executing a plan while the chaos gave it cover. If you find something that contradicts what I've laid out today, I genuinely want you in the comments arguing with me. That's the only way any of us gets closer to what's actually happening here. Mainstream coverage keeps asking whether Starmer was forced out or whether he chose to go with dignity. That's the wrong question. The question worth asking is this. If the path to Downing Street was this carefully cleared weeks before the public crisis even peaked, who decided Andy Burnham was the answer, and when did they decide it? Sit with that, look at the dates again, and I think you'll start to see something the headlines aren't built to show you.